All right, welcome to another edition of Nostr News, March 8th.
All right.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you, DK.
How's your week been?
My week has been pretty good. It's been, a little busy. One of those weeks where it didn't have as much like specific, deadlines or anything like that, but it definitely feels like somehow a lot of things accumulated. So
Right. How's your week look? Are you kind of like, in how much of your week is Nostr versus Lightning versus Bitcoin? Because you're an investment professional for people who are kind of just tuning in.
Yeah, investment professional, early stage VC or investor, I guess. Well, it's interesting. I do think it really depends on the week, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've been trying over the last 6 weeks or so to clear out as much of my schedule as possible to focus on Nostr.
Mm-hmm.
But man, that could be a as you know, that's basically a full-time job, right? So, the last couple of days, and for me, it's not in my nature to even be on social media that much on my phone. So it's kind of like, again, that's why I'm so excited to see us move past just the Twitter use case. But I would say I definitely spend a couple of hours every Monday and Tuesday now, just like scoping everything in the landscape, seeing what kinds of nodes are trending with people, studying stats. But then, at the same time, I definitely, spend, depending on the week, new portfolio companies are coming out for raises. So I spend a lot of time helping pre-seed companies raise their Cs or seed companies raise their As and thinking about their decks. A couple of companies I'm still trying to get over the finish line to fund hopefully pretty soon here. And then, working on getting my own second fund out there as well. So it really just depends on the week. This week I'm starting to, finalize some preparations for my second fund. Yeah. And so that's taking a decent amount of time. I have at least 2 companies that I'm kind of helping on the fundraise side. And then another one, you actually know who this is. I've been trying to steer a little bit or kind of plant the seeds to think about going even harder into Nostr.
Yep.
So all that, and then kind of watching what's happening in Nostr land day to day.
Yeah.
How about you? I know a lot of your time is, spent creating content now, but.
Yeah. My goal is to just kind of like learn about everything in whatever way I can. And so I think one of the best ways that I find to learn about everything is to try to invite people who know something. They don't have to be the world's leading expert. They just need to be, a few steps ahead of me so that I can get a little bit of, more context on something. So I just find a great way to learn is to talk to people. And so doing it in public is great. And I do find that I am creating a lot of video content and I don't have good workflows yet for how I turn video into like published format. So I actually have like a huge backlog of people I've talked to, super interesting conversations I want to share, but just haven't had a chance to do the kind of post-production editing stuff that I want to do. But it has been very, Nostr focused because that's kind of where most of my attention is these days.
You like Nostr?
A little bit, yeah.
But I wanted to ask you, actually, I saw maybe on Twitter of all places, the social network that Sean named, you were posting some videos in the back of a Waymo, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
What was that about?
Well, so yeah, it's actually kind of part of this. So my wife has a Waymo access, and this past week, so sometimes they've been doing Waymo with a safety driver, which means there's a person sitting there as if they're driving, but they're not really touching the steering wheel. And then as of this week, they dropped all the safety drivers.
Whoa.
So, they didn't drop the safety, they just dropped the safety drivers.
So we hope.
So now you can actually dispatch these things to most neighborhoods we want to go in San Francisco. And you can dispatch a Waymo and get picked up by a fully autonomous robot vehicle, and it'll take you wherever you want. And so we had a friend over for dinner on, when was that, Wednesday night? And we were like, hey, let's go do it. Let's go, just joyride in a Waymo. So we went over to Land's End and,
nice.
And yeah, it was super fun. Like, seeing how it works, even if you thought about it for like a decade, we've been talking about self-driving cars, and then you see it and you're like, you're in it and experiencing it. It's like, wow, this is, it's like, it brings a tear to my eye.
Nice.
It is so surprising.
And I haven't done it yet. I would love to. What is the whole experience? Do you have to download the Waymo app for?
Yeah, I think she has a friend who worked on it, so she kind of, got in line, got off. I think there's like a wait list or something. And there's like an application. You kind of have to tell them about how bad a driver you are, and then they give you an app, and the app looks a lot like Uber.
Cool. And then, obviously I know it's like very early stage, but is it already substantially cheaper than Uber? I'm assuming in this first round.
Yeah.
Is that the idea?
It's so when there's a safety driver, there's a fee that's pretty calibrated toward Uber, and then when there's no safety driver, it's free. They probably just can't. There's probably some regulatory thing they can't charge for that.
Totally.
But it's it's fun. We've been on a bunch of trips with it, and it's great. So we were doing that.
And one more question, because I'm fascinated by all this. How far can you take it right now? Like if you wanted to go to like, I don't know, like San Jose or something, could you do that?
It's a very restricted. It's only within San Francisco.
Okay.
And there's some parts of San Francisco where you can't take it. So there's pickup and destinations. Most of San Francisco is covered, but there's a few places that are not yet.
That's so exciting. I mean, I personally can't wait until I can take that thing. I haven't driven much since high school. I can drive, but I don't do it much.
Yeah.
But it'd be so nice to just be able to say, hey, I'd like to go to Big Sur or something. Like, take me there, and hopefully it's $20.
Oh, I can't wait. Yeah. It's going to happen. And then this week, it used to be that you could not share any pictures or photos or videos. That was like, don't share anything. And then as of this week, now it's please share.
That's awesome.
So that's why you saw the tweet show up was you can now, I think that was the first day you could finally share the experience.
I love it.
Yeah. So
can't wait to try it.
We're having fun with that. So last week, I think when we left off Nostr News last week, we were lamenting how we hadn't booked a place yet.
That's right.
And so we turned off the video and mics, and then we sat down and did all of our research together and booked a place.
That's right.
So we've got a place, and I think part of booking a place was fun. We got to explore Uvita a little bit,
right?
Because I didn't know what Uvita was all about. I mean, I had heard of it only through Nostrica, so I started poking around on this map. Just went on Google Maps and poked around a little bit, and then we started mapping out like some hotel options and looking at how to get how big it is across the place. I think it's, what is it? It can take half hour, 45 minutes to walk across town. So it's not like a tiny little place. There's, it's a proper kind of, more of a, it's a proper town, I'd say.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of cool. And then we found, I don't know how much we are supposed to say or not supposed to say about the venue and stuff.
Well, I would say maybe keep it high level, but what's great is that last week, props to DK here, because I didn't even think to like look at the actual map and see where the venue was going to be. All I thought was, I'll just book whatever I can find in the video before it all. And so thankfully what I booked had a free cancellation. Yeah. And so then we got to explore it and decided, without revealing exactly where everything is, that it would be awesome if we got a house together.
Yeah.
A, because it'd be fun to chill together, but B, because then we can kind of have a space, a podcast studio, and invite people to come and hang with us and jam in real time. So mission accomplished. Yeah. We have a house, and our hope is that many of you guys and gals will be interested in joining us for jams on Nostr.
Yeah. And we're going to be a 5-minute walk from the main venue, so it'll be easy to people to drop in and out, and we can hang and jam and talk and meet. It's funny because like all these people we've never met, right?
I know. It's our internet friends.
Internet friends, yeah. So it'll be fun, and a lot of people don't have profile pics, so it's hard to even know really who you're meeting, and it'll be fun to just meet in person and see.
And so for anyone out there, if you're interested in doing a live jam with us, a live Nostr News or specific topic discussion, hit us up.
Yeah. We're here for it. All right. So that is Uvita. I call it the Nostrica Airbnb sessions.
Legendary one day.
Yeah. All right. So so we wanted to get started. I think you had a meme you wanted to share.
Oh, I don't know. As I always poke through, what's going on Nostr? I just saw this share from Jack. I don't know why. I just found this absolutely hilarious. Right. It's Jack with what appears to be a cigarette or something in his mouth, riding on an ostrich. And by the way, I'm seeing ostriches more everywhere. I don't know if that's just because now I'm more attuned to them, or for whatever reason, the universe is putting more ostriches in my life. Including last weekend, I went to some these animated shorts with my girlfriend, and they had an ostrich. We talked about this video last week. An ostrich told me the world was fake, and I think I believe him, which is kind of like it's like a little bit like being John Malkovich of the Matrix. An ostrich tells this guy everything's fake around him. It's very apropos for the world in which we live and what Nostrica or what Nostr represents and what it does. But anyways, I just love this meme because it represents to me that even our most famous user Jack is just having a good time. It's staying fun, it's staying punk like we talked about last time. And as long as people keep having fun with this thing, I think we're going to win. Yep. And so I don't know, that's just very emblematic of having fun to me.
Yep. Love it. All right. So we've got a whole agenda of tabs here. Oh yeah. I was going to mention this is kind of part of our little warm up intro here. So I had a friend who was I forget if I ran into somebody on Twitter or who was talking about. Yeah, somebody had emailed me about something, and talking about, I thought that Nostr was just for social networking. We're doing this other thing, so it probably doesn't apply. And I hear that message a lot from people, so it kind of inspired me to clarify via a tweet. And I should probably also post a note, but this was somebody who I wanted to reference who's not on Nostr. And I think people sort of limit what Nostr is to social networking. I think that's somewhat because like the GitHub references like a better Twitter, and that's like a natural kind of launching off point. But what I was writing in the tweet here was every system of communication is a social network of one form or another. So whether that's governments, corporations, the internet, or mobile photo sharing apps. And so it's both correct and incorrect to think of Nostr as a protocol for social networking. When I talk about it, I usually call it a new architecture for publishing.
I like that.
And I think when you say social networking, people think photo sharing, texting, maybe text publishing, chat room, stuff like that. But I think people don't say social networking like the government or social networking like a corporation or some other, nonprofit or a standards body or something. But those are all social networks.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So I would say like if you want to call Nostr a social network, I think you need to really broaden the scope of what you mean by social networking.
Yeah, I love that. And I love thinking about, we'll talk more about this in the show today, but what are the future of corporations or governments or DAOs or these things look like? And I think there will probably be a lot of new social networks or structures that have never existed before. And that's very exciting. I also think that it maybe sounds a little too grandiose. I know there's some issues beyond just text with images and videos, but I mean, we've said this before on the show, but it's like increasingly becoming clear to me. Like, I just think the internet gets rebuilt this way.
Yep.
Like, it's not just, it's a social networking site or even marketplaces or whatever. It's just like, why wouldn't you store any information that's on the internet in multiple places, in multiple jurisdictions?
Yep.
And I know today, like I said, there are certain rich data files or types that aren't stored that way, but there's no reason they can't be pointed to, and that can't be solved in the future. So to me, I'm just thinking this is like, to your point, it's a new type of social network. It's just a new internet.
Yeah, I agree. And I was, I think it was in the conversation I had with Naut where he was talking about there's sort of two things. There's things that you want to be fully private, and then there's things that you want to be fully public and not able to be suppressed. And in that he was saying Nostr is really good at the second, and it's not really designed for the first. But if it's not designed for the first, how do we make the first work? And I don't think we have like a credible architecture for that yet, because a fully peer-to-peer system still has this problem that like maybe your phone's off or your battery's off or offline. So it feels to me like something Nostr-like, maybe it's the relay architecture itself, could be extended or changed or some. I would hope it's not some parallel thing, but it seems like it should be able to also help us like store messages that are meant for private consumption, but I guess which would have some other signature on it that would prevent the metadata from being visible the way they are in kind of Nostr today.
Totally.
But yeah, I when you sort of broaden it to like kind of the whole internet being rebuilt, I think private communication is still important, and I wonder. I mean, if maybe there's people who've really thought about this or discussion that's active on, but I'd love to hear people's kind of best thinking on that, because I don't know what the current state of like the thought leaders in this space are.
Totally. And even then, I mean, I agree. There's a lot to solve there, but it's also not like the current internet is great for that either, right? Like most people, even if you're using quote unquote encrypted chat, you're still using Signal servers. They still get a lot of metadata on you. I mean, maybe Nostr's leaking more metadata than they are today. Probably they are. I'm not deep in the weeds there. But my best guess is that you're going to see a variety of different experiments. There will be a lot of this that's just over the major public servers. There will be some niche servers that are known for being more privacy focused, and like maybe they have their server in Switzerland, and like maybe one day the data is sharded between 3 or 4 different servers, and there's like armed guards, like wherever all that's going to go or whatever. It's just like very hard to find, more almost dark webby.
Yeah.
And then you're also probably going to have personal servers, and this is going to be like the Umbrel kind of revolution where, maybe I'm posting from my phone, but I'm posting to my own server at home or my friend's server if you're running a server for me. And then I think maybe you'll also see experiments where it is still direct peer-to-peer communication. So Nostr and the kind of like, client server client model will help you discover another client or another peer. And then maybe from there you do, socket to socket communication.
Yeah. So it's almost like the town square, the public thing is really only required for the initial connection or kind of the discovery of who's where, or which person I want to connect to, and then you can kind of go peer to peer from there. So you avoid the centralized server issues.
But the key thing there, obviously, is that the beauty of what Nostr does is it allows for that discovery. It gives us a simple private public key, naming convention. Yep. And maybe in the future that ends up being derived from DIDs or something that's a little bit more transmittable. Like if you lose your key, I mean, I still think rekeying is a huge thing there. Right. But yeah, I don't see any reason why not. Like why Nostr can't be for public information, discovery, and then peer-to-peer encrypted chat should always be an option.
Yep. Makes sense. This is a fun tech show. Okay, so I know we like to try to start by looking at stats.
Yeah.
So why don't we pull up the stats here?
Love it.
And then how should we do this? You want to go, you said you have a few things you wanted to.
Yeah, I always like looking for one thing. The daily actives is interesting. It's kind of remaining a little constant. I always like looking at weekly active constant. I like going down to the total users and just seeing where we are there. So if we only look at total users with bio, I think that's helpful.
Yeah, so this is the one. So total users with bio were about 808,000.
Okay, cool. So for context, I mean, about 2 months ago or in mid-December, it was about 1K-ish and then exploded after the Jack Dorsey thing and then Zaps and all that and Ed Snowden. And then it's interesting because like now it's slowed down a little bit. We're still growing by a couple thousand every day. That's good.
Yep.
But it's definitely like, I'm curious question for you because you've seen other networks have gone through like periods of like, almost like punctuated explosion.
Right,
and then, how do you think about the growth curve? Like, is it going to be up and to the right forever? Like, is it going to be a month of silence, a week of silence, and then another explosion? Like, it seems like we're healthy to me and that growth is crazy. But I am a little surprised even in the last week that it hasn't ticked up again.
Yeah. Why are you surprised it hasn't ticked up? Was there some?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm so deep in this stuff and just so like captivated by it. I know a big part of the answer is most people have like jobs and like other stuff. But like, I mean, to me, it's just like, oh my God, we're zapping each other on the internet. Like, how is this not just exploding everywhere? And it is, but
Yeah. I mean, I'm pulling up here like the weekly active users. Like if you look at this, I think this is kind of telling for how I would think about it, which is if you look back in January, there were 6,000 high quality, bio public keys and writing events. Yeah. And that was way higher than the month before.
Yeah.
And then there's the exogenous events of, I don't know, is this hitting the App Store or something? And then there's like a trailing off again.
Yeah.
And, I think a healthy curve is just going to be, does each time it kind of has a bump up and then it fades and then something else happens in the world that causes another bump up and then that fades. And I think that's kind of what healthy would look like. I don't think you want this thing like it would just melt. I mean, everything's already melting anyway.
Yeah.
And there's problems to be solved. And I don't, whether you could want it or not, I just don't think you would expect to see, especially in a broadcast medium like this, I just don't think you'd expect to see like only up and to the right. I think you just need like a healthy, active, continued interest. And then every time it bumps, it kind of fades to a higher level than it was before.
And that, by the way, I mean, that's what's happened with Bitcoin, right? Like, it's not like it's been pure. I mean, again, zoom out, right? Like Bitcoin's like less than 15 years old. And it's so from that vantage point, it is purely up and to the right. But, you have a couple like huge run up and then a decline, but every new high, every new low rather is higher than the last one. So I think that makes sense. I mean, is this when your experience, what you saw, how does this compare with adoption of like early Facebook, early Twitter, early Google even?
Yeah. I mean, I think Google and Facebook were each pretty different because they were not really publishing platforms. So they were more, those really were more kind of vertical walls all the time with no ebbs and flows. And I think that's mostly because, just like the growth of Google's growth was the growth of the web.
Yeah.
And then Facebook, because it's a private it's more of a private messaging use case. It's a little bit of a public small group, let's say, but it was not a public publishing thing. And so I think that was basically, vertical wall most of its early days. Twitter was a lot more like this, which
punctuated.
Was punctuated. Yeah. I'm trying to remember all of the things, but I remember like, do you know the Hudson airplane crash? The airplane crash in the Hudson River. That's one of the ones that I recall being, kind of early and one of those punctuated moments. Like it's like, Edward Snowden coming on Nostr. So I think those kinds of things, Arab Spring, everybody quotes as an early thing, which, I mean, when I think about it, like there were lots of other little micro moments that are not really newsworthy in a sense. But I think that characteristic of like the burst and then the fade followed by, fade to a new high that, the stable may be higher than the previous burst even.
Yeah.
You may or may not, but then you have like some stability of usage, and then there's it just lives long enough that there's another burst in the world that causes a bunch of other eyeballs, interest, attention to focus on learning about this, and then it sort of fades a bit. And it's just that similar pattern. I think we did see. My recollection of early Twitter is that it had that same kind of feel to it.
What about early Reddit? Was that similar too?
Ooh, early Reddit. I mean, Reddit. I recall I wasn't as active on Reddit that early. I was like aware of it, but not super active. I was using Hacker News.
Oh, nice. Or Hacker News. Yeah.
But that's like everybody's kind of gathered in one place and everybody's looking at the same stuff, and there's less of a network to it. Mm-hmm. It's more just a bunch of content in a single place. So that always felt like, it was kind of going in the same way. It didn't have quite the same types of, bumps. Actually, YouTube had similar bumps, though I don't know that it had as much fading but there were just like these moments, like Lonely Girl, it was like
I don't even remember that
girl like vlogging in her bedroom was like one of the big early moments, because like it was just weird to see another person on the internet in video just like sharing really kind of personal stuff.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a moment. I think, what was it? The Janet Jackson clothing malfunction was like another moment. Just like these moments in these publishing platforms just drive a lot of like curiosity, right?
Yeah. What I'm particularly excited about, though, and I think this is what a lot of people are underestimating with Nostr's potential is, and by the way, I just want to also clarify when DK was saying like there's like 6K and then it went to 8K or 10K, whatever, weekly actives, that's usually, that's only the publishing. So typically the rule of the internet is you have a roughly 1% of people are actually publishing. So that checks out with the idea that we have around 800,000 that are lurking, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, but what's interesting to me about that is, so far for Nostr, there's really only the Twitter use case, right? Mm-hmm. And that's to your point. People are saying, okay, I hear about this Nostr thing, decentralized Twitter. Maybe it's interesting to some people. Obviously, it is to at least 800,000, right. But a lot of other people, it's not. But I think what a lot of people are sleeping on is the super network effects here. To your point, and to our point earlier about being able to rebuild the internet, rebuilding marketplaces, chat apps, all this stuff, is that all those new waves that are coming, the new different applications, don't start from zero. So whenever they have their exponential curves, they're starting with 800,000 users.
Yeah.
Right. So let's just say, as a hypothetical, that local Bitcoins or something like that becomes the next big one, or whatever it is. Yep. Well, it's not like you're starting a new local Bitcoin site and there's no one on there. Yeah. Whatever the dominant one is, there's already 800,000 people that have pub keys. Probably a lot of those, I think it's something like 200,000 already have Lightning addresses now, like pretty high proportion. Yep. And so every new application, it's going to be like its own exponential curve, but they all feed into this other giant Nostr exponential curve. Yep. And so I think when the history book gets written, I actually think this thing is going to have like touch the world, like mainstream adoption. Yep. Like I could see this happening in like 18 months or something crazy. Yeah. Maybe that's a little absurd, but like, because every single app builds on the last one. So, let's say we're at 1 million by the end of this month or 2 million or whatever it is, if the next big app takes it from 2 to 20 and the next one takes it from 20 to 200, like I don't see why this thing can't just run.
Yep. I think that's right. I mean, that's what's exciting about it. We're building network effects at the protocol level instead of network effects at the application level. I think that's a big deal, because it means now everybody gets to play with everybody else's success instead of having to silo the success and then rebuild the success again and again. You actually just, it's more wealth for the world in a sense, right?
I love it. And by the way, this is just an idea. I went last night with my girlfriend to this like talk. We went to the Long Now talk, which I'd never been to before, but
at the Long Now Foundation.
Yeah, well, they had it at SF Jazz, and it was it was some woman writing about time, and it was okay. It wasn't exactly like my the talk that got me most excited, but I'd actually never been to a Long Now event before, and so I was really excited just now that they're coming back to get back to them. And one idea that she did drop that really resonated with me and kind of reminds me of what we're doing in Nostr, and I think is a fundamental difference that I see in a lot of the Bitcoin, Lightning, and Nostr community and the rest of the world, is this idea that basically, is the pie fixed or not? Mm-hmm. And I think that so much of our modern economy, and I think a lot of this is because of the way fiat economics work, where money is created out of thin air. The Cantillon effect, obviously, goes to those who are closer to the printer. Everyone else gets kind of screwed over. Younger generations are like, why can't I afford a house? Blah, blah. That's all been documented ad nauseum. Yep. And a lot of people don't understand why. And like even this woman was talking about, the older generations can afford things we can't. And no one talks about the money printer, which,
Right.
it is what it is. But I think what was interesting to me is, what if you had this idea that the pie is never fixed? The pie is infinite. The pie can always grow more and more and more.
Yeah.
And that me having success does not preclude you from having success, but in fact can make you have even more success.
Yeah.
And she gave the example of, instead of thinking about, she was going to this older woman's house who like grows various vegetables and she grew lettuce, right? Mm-hmm. And she was like, this woman kept trying to give me lettuce. And my initial thought was, why are you giving me all your lettuce? And then she was like, then I remembered, oh yeah, she has a lettuce plant and she needs to get rid of the old lettuce
Right.
to make room for the new lettuce. It's not like, in fact, then she can take some of that new lettuce and she can plant some of that or beans. She also used that example and there can be more lettuce, And so I just think that, I don't know where it's all going to go, but if I had to like summarize the thing that excites me the most about Bitcoin and Nostr, it is just the idea that the pie is infinite. Truly, everyone can be better off and everyone's success. And I'm not saying there won't be competition in certain fields or whatever, but like, I just think that if more people had this vision and attitude and lived experience that abundance is real and like your success really can be like everyone else's success. I don't know. I think that's the most magical thing that could happen in the world.
Yeah, I agree. I think, the internet itself has been an accelerant to a lot of those kinds of things. Like just the pace of innovation and the pace of just sharing scientific knowledge and progress has become more possible, more like faster with the internet and with, a site like YouTube that shares videos and all the world's information is accessible and you can just see things real time and know what the best in class looks like. So you can aspire to be that or to participate. You can even connect with those people.
Totally.
Those are kind of things we've seen play out over the last, call it 20 years. And I think it's not going to decelerate. I think it's going to change a lot, but it's going to, I think, accelerate the kind of abundance that we all have. And so I think the only thing scarce in the world is going to be Bitcoin. Everything else is just going to be abundant.
I agree with you. Well, Bitcoin and attention, human attention, perhaps. But even then, maybe the more, if you sit in meditation or whatever, like maybe the more your lived experience of time drags out. And anyway, so I think it's fascinating. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Cool.
We were looking at stats and we were looking at zaps. Mm-hmm. You want to pop over to the dashboard on the Discover Nostr?
Well, actually, even before we do that, could we also go back to Nostr Band? The one thing I wanted to look at always is just total number of zaps and daily zaps.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because I think this is fascinating to me.
Okay, so daily zaps, and you want to net out the other stuff here. So we're just looking at it's kind of... Yeah, so this is unit number of zaps, not total zap value, right?
That's right. This is number of like zap payments. And I just thought this was interesting. Again, there's like a little bit of an ebb right now. Like I think we reached like a kind of like manic moment about a week ago when everyone realized you can zap. And I've noticed in my own life, like I zapped less this week. I didn't stop zapping, but maybe if I sent 20 last week, maybe this week I sent 5 or 8 or something. So I don't think that's unusual, but just interesting to note.
Yeah. And I think we're at a partial day here. What are we at? 5,000, almost 6,000 zaps. So we'll probably...
How many were yesterday?
Yesterday was about 8,000.
Cool.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Real numbers.
And then total zaps, obviously that's the blue line there.
So 153,000.
There was a moment where it went almost vertical.
Right.
But, again, I think it kind of just goes back to what we were saying before. Like there will probably be some other next big use case. For example, I don't know who it's going to be, but some content creator is going to figure this out, right? I don't know if it's going to be Mr. Beast or... a rapper or whatever, but someone's going to come on here and be like, yo, I can get zapped directly from my fans, some Instagram star or something.
Yeah.
It'll probably actually be like some OnlyFans thing. It is what it is. But someone's going to figure that out. And then there's going to be just like this giant next wave that's going to make this last wave look like a puddle.
Yeah. Once word gets out that this is actually a credible way to monetize your own content creation, then all the masses of people wanting to create content and wanting to connect and wanting to sort of be able to make a living off of their content are going to want to be the place that's the best place to earn it. So
I know that's like impossible to speculate, but just for fun, looking back at the end of this year, what note do you think ends up getting the most zaps? Like what kind of note? And if you had to guess how much it's going to be.
So 2023, what would be the characteristic of the note
that gets the highest zap?
Highest total amount of zap.
Total amount. And what do you think that amount is?
Ooh, well, this gets into that topic that we we sort of dropped from the schedule because we didn't feel like we were educated on it enough.
Yeah, that's fair.
because there was I think I proposed last week that we should, at some point there's going to be the total number of zaps of the total value of the Satoshis on the Bitcoin network would get turned over in zaps. And then I think somebody did that as like a prank somehow. And I think it has to do with like how trackable or, how irrefutable are zaps. And I think the answer, if I understand right, is that right now you can send things, the clients can interpret if they believe the thing happened, but I don't think they're like sending receipts or observing the transaction or payment.
And by the way, if there's someone watching that can educate us on this, I thought it was already in the protocol that you could validate who zapped, how much was zapped. And so, yeah, I would love to get clarity on that and something we can dive into. But high level, let's just say all that's solved. And you can know for sure who zapped, how much is zapped, total amount zapped. What's your best guess?
Yeah, I mean, it seems, it seems like there might be somebody that already has some celebrity or notoriety in the existing world who comes on and then, creates something amazing. So I don't know if that's, maybe it's a musician who, people are already paying a lot of attention to and maybe drops a new song or something, or, just says something fun or funny.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it wouldn't surprise me if it's, I'm going to call it, let's say let's call it, at the time, whatever Bitcoin is worth, let's say there's like, $500,000 worth of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
By the end of the year sometime, and it'll just be a moment where people say, whoa.
Yeah, totally.
That changed content creation.
I love all of that. And I don't know, I agree with you. I don't know exactly what it's going to be. I could see a couple of different ways it goes. One way, just like speculating a little bit.
Yeah.
On the musician front, I think it's clear from some of the stuff that Jack has posted that Tidal at Block is looking very deeply into both Nostr and Lightning payments.
Right.
It's also clear based on some of their partnerships and Jay-Z being on the board of Block and like Jack's constantly sharing stuff from like Kendrick. I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe Kendrick Lamar or someone from TV, Top Dog Entertainment, probably him,
right.
Maybe they get on there, drop a new track.
Right. Yep.
If that happens, then, I think at least $1 million even, at least in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Who knows? Then you've got someone like Kanye West who's a little crazy and who's into Bitcoin. Someone like him gets on there, does something really wild.
Is he into Bitcoin?
I don't know the full deal. I know for better or for worse, the funds he's close with are more crypto funds, but he at least knows what Bitcoin is. And the man is crazy enough to try something wild. So who knows, right? But I kind of like that model. The other model that I could see would be some kind of funding, which we'll talk more about some of the potential here. But who knows? Maybe there's, like a company, kind of like a Kickstarter type project that comes out and says, we're going to release this new product and we're going to raise X amount of money for it. And they already have a huge distribution. So, they bring their audience with them and are able to crowdfund multi-million dollars to get this thing out there.
Right. Right. And you mentioned OnlyFans. Like, what's your over under on?
Yeah. I'm not going to touch that just because, it is what it is.
Because the internet is built on porn and gambling,
sex and drugs too. Drugs. Porn and gambling.
But meaning like I think back to like the 80s, 90s, like the stuff that drove. I don't know if this is. I don't know the exact stat here, but my recollection is that at least in early Google mobile, the query volume that was porn was like 40% or something.
Yeah, look, I take all that back. Like all the stuff we say is likely. What's really most likely to happen, I think both, right? I think there will be like an NSFW version and an SFW version. For the SFW version, we talked about some of that stuff. On the NSFW version, I could see two things getting big. The first is, some famous adult star or like whoever, let's say, is like the top OnlyFans earner today. I have no idea who that is.
Pretend like you don't know who it is.
That's exactly. Whoever that is, if and when they understand that they can go direct audience and make 30% more, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't be surprised to see someone come out, bring all of their audience with them and say, I'm only moving my content exclusively to this platform where I'm going to make a lot more money. And that's going to bring a new giant wave with them. And I don't know what the top zapped post is in that world, but maybe it's more in this world. because you just have more people that have Lightning wallets because there's no payment processing. There's
Right.
no like credit cards. So that's possible. The other thing I've thought about.
I'm going to pause for a second there.
Yeah.
First, shout out to all the relay operators who are sweating about this possibility.
Yeah.
But also, I think that what you're outlining with the adult stuff, I think is a credible showcase of how kind of a first micropayment pay for content thing would work.
Totally.
Right. So it's like, could you post a message that is signed in a way that requires a Lightning payment to be able to decrypt it?
Yeah.
That seems like it would happen. And if you do that, then you sort of give creators in that format, you sort of open up the floodgates. So I think it shows how it can be done with obvious use cases that people are already paying for on the internet, but have a lot of, kind of a mediated relationship, and you sort of unmediate that relationship.
Totally. And then that starts showing, like, maybe it starts off with, OnlyFans or whatever, but then it shows, hey, the Patreons of the world, like everyone, like, why am I giving anyone 30%?
Right.
Or whatever it is.
Yep.
So I agree with you on that. The other thing that I thought a little bit about, and you actually inspired some of this in your conversation with Nalt, which was very focused on like privacy stuff and the dark web, is like, I don't know enough about this, the security and stuff, but like, you would think that some of these darknet sites or whatever may also do this at some point, but I don't know. I hope it goes mainstream in a way that doesn't bring a whole bunch of like legal action or like whatever. Yeah. But I'm surprised that hasn't taken off more.
Mm-hmm. All right. Do we have more on the stats dashboard you want to look at?
No, I think
Should we
that's good.
pop over to Zaps?
Yeah, I'm always just curious to see what notes are.
We'll do a little refresh here and see what's this is.
What's hot?
What is hot? So this is 1.6 million Zaps, right? And this is from Sir Sleepy, and it says, "Nah, don't somehow, some way. I think it's just magically happen." Do you know what this is all about?
No idea.
Okay. I will be zapping you. Oh, Semisol is the one who did the kind of zap spam thing that was kind of an issue this past week or two.
I didn't see that either.
Oh, some people, I ended up tagged in this thing, and it kind of it was almost like just zapping spam or, tagging spam.
Oh, I did see a little bit of this concept that, if like Zap chains, maybe Kamari was talking about this, like if, it's like Zap of trust, building a new web of trust, kind of like the old lightning torch, like someone zaps you, you agree to zap the next person. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting to me, I guess. The only thing, the meta note I'll make on that is the top zapped posts right now are people like talking about zaps.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So
I think that's actually a healthy dynamic. Like some people are like, actually some people who follow me on Twitter and hear me talking about Nostr all the time on Twitter, and then they become curious, and then they come back with feedback. Oh, like everybody's just talking about Nostr over there. Like that's not a real thing. And I think that's actually what healthy looks like in a new broadcast network. Like everybody on Twitter was meta tweeting, right? Everybody on Nostr is meta nostring, noting, and I think that's just like what a healthy new community looks like. I know a bunch of other apps as they're new, like a lot of it is like, well, what is this feature for? How does that work? There's just so much new to it that you want to understand, and all the people there care about it. So
totally. And it's worth noting that it's not just Meta Nostr, but also Meta Bitcoin and Lightning. And so a lot of new users, and I don't know if we already have this on the thing later, but you mentioned that you've gotten people telling you that they've started listening to you, and because of that you zap them, they received their first Bitcoin ever. Like that's pretty damn cool.
Yeah, that's crazy. I'm really proud of that actually, because I do like to share the story of how what Bitcoin is, and I'd like to help more people understand it. I don't want to necessarily have people get involved until they understand it, but I'd like the understanding to come first, right?
Yeah.
And so I've been making a bunch of tutorial videos on YouTube, and so sometimes people bump into these tutorials around how to like use Lightning with Nostr or Damus or something, and then they come on. I tell them in the video, I show them how to tag me, and I say, just tag me with your, issue an invoice, tag me, and I'll pay you. And so I've been going around giving people 21 sats or something, just for fun. And, I've had multiple occasions where people say, wow, I can't believe how amazing that was. Not only do I now understand Nostr and Lightning, but this is the first time I ever held any Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's just a tiny amount. It's fun. But I think it's good to just help people see what it can do. And then you sort of graduate up the learning curve and the path of like where it fits into your life, and when you want to sort of get more involved is fine. I wouldn't want to push that on people, but just to like, as a demo experience, I am quite proud that people discover it and then they light up about it.
Totally.
And I see that again and again.
Yeah, and in fact, there's another thread. I don't think we have this one pulled up today, but on Stacker News with someone saying, Nostr and we do have it.
There you
Okay,
go.
cool. Yeah. So Nostr plus Stacker News have been life changing.
Yeah.
And this is actually a very beautiful thread. Just this dude or whoever is coming on here saying that they've learned about Zaps and Stacker News and Bitcoin all for the first time, and now they're going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, now actually building my first BTC node and zapping on a daily basis.
It's crazy.
Right? And I think the public stats on Stacker News have been also positively impacted, I think.
Oh yeah.
If we look at visitors on Stacker News, is worth taking a look. Where do we have? Maybe I don't have them up right now. But there's, I think it's been very productive for
there you go.
for Stacker News because of its kind of adjacency to everything in this ecosystem. That's the one day. Let's do zoom it out to a week so we get a better sense. But
or even maybe do a month.
Maybe a month, yeah, because you probably need some. I don't know how the cyclicality and the stats are going to look. But there's I think it's had a big impact on Stacker News and just visibility and way to participate there.
Yeah.
And I think also, if I recall, did we talk about this before? Was this recently that Kian is now saying,
oh yeah,
Nostr client, he's got a relay in Booger we talked about.
Booger.
And then I think he says Stacker News is going to become a Nostr client. And I don't know exactly what that looks like.
Neither do I.
Curious to hear from him.
In fact, yeah, it'd be great to do another jam with Kian again soon. And after he's had time to build on this, but I know he hasn't been, too private about sharing some of that stuff on Nostr. I don't know, on Stacker News. I don't know what exactly it's going to look like, but I believe he's one of the best builders I know. So I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, maybe we can get him back out to San Francisco and we can host him for a session.
Well, funny you mentioned that. We were talking about doing a little Nostr jam next week before Nostrika. So we'll talk more about that offline, but that could be cool.
That's cool. Is he, did we hear if he's going to Nostrika or we don't know yet?
I don't think so.
Okay.
He would have told us, but I haven't asked him one way or the other.
I haven't talked to him about it yet.
Kian, if you're listening, come down. Come hang.
I'm down. Cool. You want to talk, is there anything on the Zaps further? Okay. So I think we have next up the GitHub bounty.
Oh yeah.
So I think it was a while back. I feel like I've heard about weeks ago probably where Jack
at least
was
a month.
published. Yeah, maybe like a month or so. Jack was suggesting, hey, we should have a GitHub that's permissionless, and the kind of all the messaging of GitHub should be based on the Nostr protocol and stored in relays and sort of all the censorship resistance that gives. And I think was it originally, what was the scale of the original bounty? It was like 100 million sats?
I think it was, it was 1 Bitcoin.
1 Bitcoin, okay.
I think.
And then I think, did he 10x that?
Now he's 10x to 10 Bitcoin.
Okay, so he's saying this is so important. I'm going to put, money, sound money where my mouth is, and this should be now 10 Bitcoin, and we need a decentralized version of GitHub that nobody can take down. And I assume the first thing you do with that is, get the Bitcoin repo running off of that.
Exactly. And, I don't know all the details here, but I do know that, again, I try and avoid a lot of the legal stuff if I can, because it's just kind of depressing. So I do agree with Jack that in the long run, this is a very important thing. The thing that fascinates me the most about this story, though, is just how cool it is that you can, kind of test the market in real time.
Yeah.
Okay, we want this thing to exist in the world.
Yep.
It's a hard problem.
Yep.
1 Bitcoin. Is that enough? No, it's not enough. Okay. 10 Bitcoin. Is that enough?
Yep.
Maybe. But I would imagine if in a couple of months it's still not built, does he go to 50?
Right.
Maybe.
Well, when I saw him up it from, I guess I looked at the tweet more, or the note more specifically, it was I think 120 million originally, and then it bumped up to a billion sats. And when I saw him bump it up, I reposted it with a comment I'd like to participate in crowdfunding this. So we've talked a little bit about crowdfunding and some of the services like Geyser that support crowdfunding, but I almost want a very simple crowdfunding mechanism where a bounty can be where I can contribute to a bounty, right? And if I contribute, I think other people can also contribute, and we can all come together. So it doesn't have to just rely on one person who's staking the whole thing, but it can be kind of more community driven. And so I was tweeting that, noting that. Is that what we call it? We call it noting or
I guess.
nostering it? And I think, did you tag in the Geyser guys?
I did.
Yeah. And so I feel like people are kind of getting into, let's build these features or that feature. I was like, let's just do it on a note.
Yeah.
Like, let's just assemble the note and figure out what it is, and we can all zap
Well,
each other, send it.
And we talked a little
behind
bit
the
about this ourselves, but I think Mick, one of the founders of Geyser, kind of asked, okay, what would that ideal, I guess, product or whatever look like? And so I think your point is, first version is just do it on a note. But as you start thinking about it a little bit more, like what do you think that ideal fundraising platform is going to look like? Like, for example, one of the things I know that he was really interested in is like, do you need that feature of all or nothing, for example?
Right.
Or, I think both of our position on this was probably like in the first iteration, it's okay to have just like a centralized person that you pledge it towards who owns the note, and you just trust that person. And if they rug you, then you just stop ever funding them again. But how has your thinking evolved on what that would look like over time?
Yeah. I mean, it's actually relevant to another topic we've got on the list. So Nostrocket is in a sense an attempt to start to understand some of those things and try to at least have a hypothesis put out that we can then all kind of try and collaborate around and see where it works, where it fails. So I think Nostrocket, which I think was, I just saw it this morning for the first time. I don't know if it had been around a day or something.
Yeah, I didn't see it until literally walking over here to this house.
Yeah,
so.
but I think it's like very hot off the press.
Yeah.
Very new here. So
do we want to jump into that right now? Or?
Yeah, we can do that. Why don't we do that? So this is Nostrocket. Let's pop up. I'm going to pull up a, where do I have it? I've got it on my list of things here.
Oh, nice. I'd only seen it in black and white on my phone. This is a nice color.
Yeah. So Nostrocket. So this is a project website launched by G Sovereignty, who organizes the Nostrovia podcast.
Cool.
So they do a lot of kind of more technical discussions around Nostr and which new NIPs are coming and stuff like that. So I didn't realize that he was also working on this project. I think he sort of put Nostrovia on pause for a few days at least this week, and he's been focused on trying to, I guess, define how, a way to sort of assemble capital for these projects. And so the core idea here, I think the FAQ is kind of a good overview. So first up, like, why Bitcoin? I think everybody understands that a lot of these, like, a lot of people use the term DAO, right? A decentralized autonomous organization. It kind of has a little bit of a bad taste in some people's mouth, because oftentimes it kind of commingles, a new funding model with issuance of a new money, which kind of makes it awkward for people who are kind of okay with the new money we already have, that that's sort of based on sound principles and stuff. So I think it's nice that it's exploring a lot of the good ideas around DAOs without commingling it. Just like, for simplicity's sake, money's, kind of a new money has been invented, so let's just we'll build on top of that instead of trying to reinvent that part. But he talks about sort of how, I think he's basically proposing a model for how funding can work. And we talked about how bounties have this limitation that you're kind of, as a developer, it's a little bit of that all or nothing. Like, I take the risk with my time. I see if I can do the thing. If I achieve the bounty, I get paid. If I don't get paid. And I think that's still kind of a feature of the system, but there's a little bit more of this concept of a share in the success of the project. So I think it's designed somewhat as an alternative or replacement or improvement on venture capital. Yeah. Right. Which is, obviously, your business is about venture capital to fund Bitcoin Lightning and Nostr services. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that, those services are sometimes open source and they have all kinds of different contributors. And the goal is to be able to build something that you couldn't otherwise build in an open source way. Yeah. But when you build those things, if they can create a lot of value and they can capture a small portion of that value that they create for the world, then how do you sort of track and distribute that? And that requires a new type of, like share or equity or security. I don't know. But I think it's interesting that this, it creates the concept of shares, and you get Bitcoin for, like, as a developer. I'm gonna actually scroll down to the this chart here. So contributors can switch between shares and direct payment with every expense request. So this is all hot, fresh. I'm not super deep on it, but my understanding is you basically log a problem, and if you are excited to build something, you can claim the problem and say what you want to do, and then there's like a layer of people who can review you can work on a solution. And I think he suggests that the solution should be spaced, kind of chunked in about 6 hours of something you could accomplish within 6 hours. Instead of like, you're not going to plan like the next, 9-month, work stream, but what can you accomplish in 6 hours? And then I think you can submit a pull request or something equivalent to that, sort of submit your work. And then whoever it is that was proposing the problem and kind of organizing the problem can verify that you did the work or that it was like accomplished the goal. And then I think you can either take payment in Bitcoin that was all staked in a non-custodial way, or you can take it as shares in the project. And if it's shares in the project, then as the project shares may increase in value, like there's no value to start with, but as the project shares may increase in value, you may be able to, that might be like a better economic risk trade-off than taking the Bitcoin directly.
And how are the shares created? Like, is there a set number of shares? Who decides when new shares are issued? And yeah, like what is the, like, how are the shares valued?
Yeah.
Like, for example, if I say, I think my contribution was worth $10,000 and I could take that $10,000 valued in Satoshis right now or in shares. Like, how is that set?
Yeah, I think there's a market mechanism for that where my understanding is there are some kind of offers made. So shares are only created by approving an expense. Nostrocket projects revolve around shares. Each Nostrocket project has its own set of shares. These represent work that has been done within the project. Expense is only created in response to work done. So you do work, you submit an expense, and then you either can merge pull requests. You get either a share or Satoshis for that. But I think there's something of a project maintainer type role, like in the kind of GitHub parlance.
Well, it's interesting. It says here also, shares are always produced 1-to-1 per Satoshi claimed in the expense. So a share is worth 1 Satoshi, maybe?
Yeah, I guess like maybe to zoom out, the big question, and I think it's a good one that you're asking, and I don't know the answer, is that you need to have some sort of like definition of how things get issued,
right,
who issues them, what's the governance model for who's allowed to issue it. Is kind of the function that a board would play, right, in issuance, but it's trying to do it in a more like atomic way so that I don't think it necessarily would be productive to replace every ambitious tech product today, but maybe something like the development of a new piece of software, like a decentralized GitHub or something. That feels
Totally.
like,
yeah. And so, I mean, look, I have a lot of thoughts, a lot of questions. I have not had a chance to go deep on this yet, so I'm excited to, and I'm so glad people are experimenting with this. So one thing that I've been waiting to see for years now, because as you know, in my last fund, we invested in a lot of like the Ethereum ecosystem. There's a lot of, excitement around DAOs. And I think the idea around a DAO is like, of course, take a giant step back, right? We talked about in the show last time that there are a lot of pros to having a joint stock corporation in the United States.
Yep.
A lot of those pros are that we have a legal system that's developed over hundreds of years. There's a reason everyone registers in Delaware. That's because that's where there's the most case law. You can get, reasonable certainty around how certain situations are going to be handled or not.
Yep.
There's also a lot of negatives of being a joint stock corporation in the United States. One of those negatives is, if I'm someone in India, how do I invest in it? Right. So it's very limited in the scope of who can invest. Another problem is the only options for liquidity, at least in venture capital, the world in which I play and you play to a degree, is you have to either have, an acquisition by a large tech company or go public. Well, what about the cases where, maybe you're something like 37 Signals or whatever, where you have, you don't want to go public. You've been very explicit about creating a solid tech company, but you don't really have as many liquidity options. Maybe people can buy secondaries, but even that's not very transparent. And that's like its own whole world. And so one thing that I've always wanted, and I think this is what it's getting at, is you think about what is a share of a company? Well, all a share of a company is, all equity is a claim on future cash flows.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
And so you believe, and again, I invest in the earliest stages, so I rarely do any kind of like financial modeling or whatever. But like, as you get later and later in a company's life cycle, maybe at a Series B or Series C, you start actually saying, okay, well, like at sort of quote unquote terminal value, or, at some point in the future, what kind of revenues do I think this thing can bring in? Revenues obviously minus expenses, like how much money, how much profit is there to be made there? And so if I buy a share today when the company is generating, $10 of revenue, or let's say $10 of profit, and I believe in the future it's going to generate $1,000 of profit, well, then that's a really good opportunity for me, 100x.
Yep.
And so one thing that I've really been waiting for is, shares that are just claims on future SAT flows.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that just makes so much damn sense. Like,
right.
I know that I want to get paid out in Bitcoin. And a nice thing about this Bitcoin native model is maybe I don't want to touch the fiat world at all, because I know in the future, dollar denominated cash flows are going to be worth so much less because of inflation.
Right.
But I know I want to buy Sats flows. And so, and by the way, we talked about this last time as well. There's going to be a whole industry of like niche industry of Bitcoin private equity that comes after this first, I thought, but maybe this will supersede it. And so I love that concept of having, like, putting aside the term DAO because it's so loaded, maybe we should find something else. But like, what does a corporation look like that's internet first? Like, what does a 21st century corporation look like? And I've had some of my LPs ask me, and I don't have a great answer to them yet. It's like, even though we're investing in all these, Delaware C Corps, generally that's what we do. Is that really the right option for a Bitcoin or Nostr company? I think in 10 years, the answer is no.
Right.
I think it is today. But yeah, I think this is moving us in that direction of, now again, then you get to the question of like, well, how do you adjudicate? There's not like case law on the internet. And I think it's going to take time to figure that out.
Right.
But I love this idea of what does a corporation look like internet first?
Right. And I agree. And I'm interested to see this play out, because I think it's nice to play out in a small scale where the issuance is kind of low stakes and kind of, it's meant to be a little playful. It's not really meant to be corporations, but it's just like a way to play with the model, because we can try to, I think we could come up with a better proposal for what it should look like if we take a little bit of low stakes time to play with it without, I think the trouble comes when you do sort of issuance that you're sort of trying to transact and sell directly, you can have problems with it. But I think if you do some small scale experimentation, you can learn a lot about it and come up with like a better proposal for how that kind of governance should work.
Agreed. And one thing I would just tell everyone is, and I, like you, love the experimentation. I mean, I've seen things like quadratic funding brought up, which, maybe next show I'll have some more time to read up and discuss. So I love all the experimentation and the new, but one thing I would just encourage people that are thinking through these projects to also consider is like, there's a reason that, corporations evolved the way they did. And like, even though there's a lot of problems, we don't necessarily need to throw everything out with the bathwater. And like, for example, one thing that I never really loved, although I could be totally wrong on this, I totally leave that possibility open, but like, is it a good idea for everyone to vote on everything? Probably not.
Right.
Like, is there like a good reason that like, boards, but maybe there's more transparency in how boards are elected. Maybe there should be, bigger boards or smaller boards. I don't know. Like, there's a lot to figure out, but I would just encourage people to like both experiment freely, but also, study a little bit about why corporate law and structure evolved the way it did.
Right. And I think one of the things I think there's obviously all kinds of like really radical models that could be tried. The stuff that I am excited about is just the concept, like the joint stock corporation was created before we had really good communication channels.
Totally.
And now we have really, really good communication channels, right? Everything's over fiber optics. The speed of light, it's internet.
And magic internet money.
Yeah. So in that world, you could imagine new structures that should get formed. But I think the core principle that I think is most interesting about this idea is trying to keep the timeframes of contributions very small so that it becomes like a new atomic building block that maybe then could get composed into bigger things. Like maybe I'm going to do a 6-hour contribution, somebody else going to do a 6-hour contribution, and over time we're going to get hundreds of human hours of contribution towards something, and then that builds it up. Instead of the current thing is like maybe a corporation is trying to develop a piece of software, maybe you sort of put together a 9-month roadmap, and you've got all these people sitting around trying to define what are the features and what is the software. And there's just like a lot of mess in that process. But if you break it down to like the atomic unit of like the 6-hour contribution, and then try to figure out how to build up systems, and probably lots of them will be wrong. Like, I don't think everybody's going to get it all right in the first time, but just like to be able to experiment with like, if you take 6-hour work units and recompose them into helping people do more together, like what can be achieved and how do you sort of align incentives?
Totally. And I think the other big difference in this model in this world is just it's global.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that's most exciting me is I look at my portfolio from my first fund and like, there's, I would say a lot in the US, but like, I think it's at least 50-50 international at least. So I think this is really cool. One question I have for you, DK, a little self-interested here, but like, you know, how quickly am I going to be out of a job? Like how fast, I say that somewhat tongue in cheek. But you know, I've always thought, and then to be clear, I think there are, you know, cases where really, you know, experienced connected venture capitalists are always going to be able to really, you know, at least the sort of the top of the game, help companies or projects, whatever they're called in the early company formation. But at the same time, like I do think that going direct to crowd is frankly a better way to fund a lot of things, and maybe even all startups in the future. I don't know. That's possible. I remember, you know, USV jokingly, or I don't know if they were joking or not, but mentioned in one of their last fundraisers, you know, this is back in the ICO craze, and then whatever came after that, they're like, this may be our last fund ever. And I was like, okay, well, you guys are probably a little hyperbolic and definitely on the wrong rails, but you know, 10 years out, 20 years out, maybe they're not.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, the time frame is kind of everything here. So like in the near term, you know, I think a lot of like when you see such a new primitive like Bitcoin, Lightning, Nostr, I think you can start to project like where could that go? Like how many places could it touch? And I think the answer is basically everywhere. Everywhere, yeah. But then if you wind it back to reality, like today, like these technologies touch almost nobody yet, right? Which is like both exciting, but then also like let's sort of figure out it's not going to be next week, it's not going to be like next month. It's going to take a while, right? And so, what is the time frame? I think is really important. And during that time frame, we're going to see the existing institutions will probably stumble in different ways, and we can't predict all of what those are. But I think we're going to live for a long time with the existence of these new technologies and the existence of the old technologies, let's call it. You know, the government and corporations are technologies in a way. And I think they're going to kind of live together, and it's going to be a little bit of like a dance, a tug of war, you know, a carefully kind of choreographed, and sometimes not so choreographed, but kind of a carefully step dance. So I don't think your role of allocating capital to ambitious creators and you know, being able to contribute your network and knowledge and experience I don't think that's going away. Like it's certainly not going away next month. Yeah. And I don't think it's going away.
Got at least a month left.
I think you got at least a month left. I think 2-month time frame. Yeah. I'm guessing you're still good.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
But I don't know, man. I'm going to guess it's years and, you know, maybe decades. Yeah. Because there's just a lot of complexity in how, I mean, it's ultimately this complexity in how humans coordinate and collaborate, and even just like from a thought to an action. Yeah. We're not really closing that gap next week.
Totally. And to be clear, 2 things I'll say on that. One, I would welcome that, right? Like, I am a VC right now, but I've been many other things in my life. I expect to be many more things in the future, right? So like, yeah.
And your rap career can finally take off.
Absolutely. I would love to have more time to focus on rap. Great. Like, so if that happens, so be it. Amazing. But at the same time, I do think that, you know, I think in a lot of questions about what is the internet going to do, what is AI going to do, what is Nostr, Bitcoin going to do, the answer is yes, and. Yeah. Like I just think there's going to be, as we talked about, bigger pie, more opportunities all across the board. And so, you know, I do think, like, for example, in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot more of the democratization of venture capital because of stuff like AngelList. Made it a lot easier for me to raise my first fund, right?
Yep.
Absolutely. Incredible. And so I think that's been a very good source of new both capital coming into venture capital. And by the way, venture capital is still an extremely small percentage of global economy, right? Like it's like way smaller than, you know, private equity, structured finance, like bonds, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And so it's still a very, very tiny niche group right now. And so what we've seen is that as you've gotten a lot more solo GPs like me and other people coming in, great. But like, I mean, Sequoia is still here. They're still Sequoia. Yep. And so I think that over time, you know, maybe, I mean, I think what this is going to do, and I think this is both like scary to some people, but also super exciting, is it means more and more people are gonna have to find the thing they're really good at doing. Yeah. Whatever that is in the world. And it's terrifying at first because maybe you're like, well, I've always done this. Right. You know, I've always been, you know, if you've always been a VC and now it's like, well, maybe you're not going in the future, that's scary, but it's also exciting if you take the right approach to it, because now you find something new that you're good at. But like, I think as an example, you know, you mentioned the network and knowledge and experience, you know, someone like a John Doe or whatever is still going to be very valuable with his network and experience, even in a world where you can raise direct from, you know, people on the internet, right? Like if you have a chance to work with him, probably, you know, it's a good idea to use that network and experience and blah, blah. And maybe, you know, the rate that he would charge is still going to be higher, but it's worth it to you for all the extra benefits that get added. Right. But if you're kind of like, a like more mid-tier performer in anything. This is what the internet's done, right? It's just been like the best at everything really, really succeed. And that's not to say that I think this also means that we talked about more cottage industry, the Kevin Kelly 1,000 true fans. But yeah, I'm guessing that it just means like the very, very best. The competition is going to be much harder for that. The best VCs or whatever in the game today, probably still going to be good VCs, but maybe there's some, kid in India that's also equally as good and hustles harder. And like now he or she makes it to that list as well. And then on the other end of the spectrum, maybe like sort of these like middling funds die, which is a lot. And then on the other end of the spectrum, then you see a lot more things that are not pure venture capital, but more of the Kevin Kelly style of, you go and you raise directly from your fans. And maybe some of those end up being venture winners, but the vast majority of those are more, lifestyle type businesses.
Right. And I'm actually, I guess that brings it back to one of the questions we were talking about before, which is there's this kind of Gary Gensler moment. Is it tomorrow or something? But there's kind of that question, like, what is a security and how should securities evolve in a way that is healthy for us as humanity to move forward? And I think a lot of the experiments that have been tried are maybe not so healthy,
right.
But that doesn't mean that like we just have to, like the whole world should agree to return to just exactly what we have. Like I think the main key thing in my mind is the atomicity of the work unit that can be sort of recomposed. But we don't have the right answers yet. But it touches on those issues, which is why I think, my question or anybody sort of around early stage technology is how do we help kind of galvanize and assemble teams and people to be able to accomplish more together?
Yeah, I love it.
Right? So
more experimentation, good.
So I don't know if you met this Joseph Jacks guy. I've not met him before, but have you bumped into him?
I've never met him, although I have come across him both from some of his just general open source writing, but also he was, I think, the lead investor in Umbral Seed Round, where I put in an angel check prior to starting my fund. So that's the only context I know.
Right, because I don't know him. I've not met, but we were trading DMs, and I saw him tweet today. He said, "What should be open source that is not?"
Everything.
I know. So I said space travel.
And what did he say?
He gave me like a fire thumbs up or something. Or maybe that was actually a tweet. But I think it kind of speaks to a little bit of the questions that we're talking about, because it's like one of the most ambitious, capital intensive, longest time frame type of projects that humans come together to do.
Yeah.
So the reason I mention it is like almost to provocatively say, like, how would that work? Not claiming it can't, but just like, how would it? Because if we can solve that, then we kind of have everything else solved too.
If this guy is down, I am very curious beyond just Bitcoin Nostr and taking the limits. I would love to have a conversation around how far can open source go? Can everything be open source?
Yeah.
And what does a company look like in that world? On that point, this is something we're going to mention later, but I'll just mention it now. Jack put out on Nostr another announcement from Block. Those guys have been crazy. They've got a lot of stuff coming out recently. They have their new LSP, which we mentioned later, sequels, which is cool. But even cooler to me was their MDK mining development kit.
Oh, I saw you tweet about this, but I haven't.
Yeah, well, I'll just mention now. I mean, I don't know any of the details. I just saw the public press release or whatever it is. But the general point was they're saying, look, like we have this goal so that anyone can basically to set a clear set of standards that anyone can easily create their own miner. And to do that, that means you need to be able to like basically use hardware that's easily sourced and have open source design to put that hardware together and software to run that. Like, for example, the actual firmware that runs the miner. And that's fucking crazy. I mean, that's amazing because now, I mean, how solar punk is that? We get into a world where like, maybe you have your own solar panels on your roof. I've always thought it'd be very interesting that in the future you have your own solar panels and in the inverter, which is, what, basically converts electricity so you can use it in your house. Maybe you have a mining chip, an ASIC in the actual inverter. So in the future, in real time, and one day your house is connected with all the other houses in the grid. Yeah. In real time, you have an electron. You say, do I sell it? Do I mine it? Do I, use it? Do I sell it to the grid or my neighbor? Anyways, but just this idea that I love what it appears Block is doing in pushing the limits. Obviously, they've done a lot with Spiral and open source Bitcoin software development, but to open source the actual hardware. And Elon Musk, even though he's certainly not on board the Nostr train yet, but I was always extremely impressed when he open sourced all of Tesla's patents. I was like, that's a very ballsy, but like. That move says, all right, like we believe we're going to win just by having the best products and this is best for the world. I've always hated IP. Like, I think it's amazing. The more that knowledge gets out there, the faster everyone accelerates, but you have to truly believe. And this is what I'd be curious to hear, Joseph Jack's take on, given that he's only invested in open source companies. You have to believe there's still a way that, your companies can grow the pie for everyone, but still, keep a reasonable slice of the pie.
Right. You have to have some, in a sense, that's kind of back to the securities question. How do you own something that grows faster than just the pie itself? Because if you can't own something that may grow faster than the pie, then it's hard to get people excited to come together to try to work on that, right? Like you need to have an incentive for human energy to come together.
Totally.
So yeah, I think he does all open source. I think we're meeting in the next day or two, actually. So
amazing. I'd love to know that.
Maybe I can drop you in, or we can share the video once we've made it.
That'd be cool.
Cool. So on our agenda, can we pop over to badges?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a new thing. So this, I think it was it bit 57 or 58?
I think it was, one of those 57 maybe.
Kind of defined the badges concept. And I think the badges, there's, an idea that you could have something like a hub of a club.
Mm-hmm.
Would be kind of the hub of a badge. Like somebody creates a club, a badge, and then can assign it or grant it to people, and then they can accept it, and then it can show up on their profile that they're a member of that club.
Yeah.
That's the kind of high level idea that's going on here. And so badges.page is the first one that I've seen in the wild where we actually have like an example implementation of it.
Cool.
So this is a badge I just logged right in, not even with my proper keys. This is just, a default view. But you go to badges.page, you can log in, and then you can see which badges you've accepted with your logged in key, which ones have been awarded to you, and I assume those are like not yet accepted. And then there's the ones that you've created. And this is shout out to Carnage and Verberica because they were the ones who built this.
Cool.
But yeah, I think this is like a very cool concept. I was playing around with this, and it brought up a question for me around Alby.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we texted about this a little bit, but maybe you can just clarify. So I haven't used a lot of Alby, and I'm very paranoid about using my Nostr NSEC, my private key, kind of anywhere, just because I know, as much as even everybody has good intentions, it's pretty new and raw, and there's probably gaps in security, especially when pasting into websites. So they advise you to not paste into website. So my understanding is the right way to do this is you install Alby, which has much more history of security. So extension on Chrome.
It's also all open source.
Right, all open source.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of been banged on, and everybody's looked at it for many years, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, like a little over maybe like a year and a half or something. But the Nostr integration, to be fair, is much newer. They launched that in October.
Okay. But then I would store my NSEC, my private key from Nostr with Alby. And then does Alby need to have an integration with badges, or does badges have to have an integration with Alby, or how do they talk to each other? Because I assume that it's not just pasting it into my webpage for me, right? That wouldn't accomplish.
I would certainly hope not, right? So to be clear, I'm not a super expert on this. The actual protocol and how it works, but my understanding is I think it's NIP 7, maybe it's one of the early NIPs that basically sets a standard for browser extensions to speak with Nostr capable sites and sign. Now, I know there's a couple of these. Alby is certainly the most polished team that I'm very proud to have backed and work with all this stuff. But I'm also very paranoid about pasting my private key since getting hacked. And so I've only really been using that private key on my iOS with Damus since that happened. And which is, again, why I cannot wait for a Mac OS app that works with the old chip, with Intel chips. I cannot wait for someone to release that. But if anyone hears that, please tell me. I want to use it on my computer. But I have been very paranoid. And I think Alby is by far the safest way I would imagine. But one thing that I know that those guys just have a lot on the roadmap right now. They're kind of overworked at the moment, but delegation where, for example, I only put in my public key to read, that's something I'd be interested in, or, I don't know. I assume this stuff is just going to keep getting safer and safer over time.
Right.
But I do, and Boomy or someone, if you're listening to this, it would be great to get even more explanation from you guys. I am pretty sure that there is, a standard for not just like pasting a private key.
Right. Yeah. There must be. So then my question is, and again, I'm super noob at this. I really have no idea what I'm doing. I've got Alby installed. I've got the extension. We're looking right now at the extension, my view of the extension. This is not a proper, website on the internet, but here I can see the Nostr section of the Bitcoin Lightning Wallet, LB.
Yeah, that's great.
And it shows Astral, Blogstack, Emon.chat, Hamster, Iris, Notebin, Snort, and YoSup.
I never heard of YoSup. I like
Me
it.
neither. I hadn't heard of that either. So we can take a look at YoSup.
Sup?
Is this going to work?
I have no idea.
Oh, boy. Okay, we're on a little bit of a rabbit hole. So let's not do NoSup right now. But I would expect to see badges.page here. And if I don't see it, does that mean it doesn't implement it?
No. You can, there's definitely, again, I forget the NIP. I think it's NIP 7 or something, but you can definitely, so if you go back to pages, right, you can definitely log in with Albion, and I'll create dummy accounts to do this just to be extra safe right now to play with.
Right.
But if you go back to pages,
I'm looking for it. Sorry.
then there's like a login portion.
This one. Yep.
Yeah. So if you go log out.
Yeah. So we log out.
Okay. Then go to login.
Login.
Yeah. And then you go to scroll down, and you'll see we recommend using the extension such as Albi. And so I believe what you would do here is you would just say sign in. And if you have
It
this,
says invalid NSEC.
let's see, I'm doing this in real time.
Yeah.
I know there's a way to do this, but I think what it would be is you have to have keys in here. So if you go to your Albi settings.
Okay. Maybe if I had my.
Exactly. So in fact, if you go to Albi settings, I don't know if.
Yeah.
You can go to the Nostr page on there and create a dummy account just to see it work.
On settings. Okay. Why don't, I probably shouldn't do this right now.
Yeah. Anyways, but the point is,
yeah,
there's a Nostr settings down there. So if you just say, hey, generate private public key pair just to play with it safely, I think what then happens is when you go to click login, it'll detect that.
Okay.
And then it'll bring up a dialog box in your Albi
I see. So it's all based on hopefully that NIP 7 sort of integration already being present.
Whatever that NIP is.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, cool.
But to be fair, I mean, I've used that in a number of different places with Albi, using a variety of different identities, and it's been pretty seamless. And I know the Albi team is very bullish on this idea of becoming kind of like the easiest way to log in Nostr on the web. And I've been very encouraging that. Like, guys, if you become the way people log in with Nostr, like that's huge. And again, there's going to be a lot. Like there's other competitors, but I just think that's where the web is headed, like very soon. And even though I love logging with Lightning, we've talked about this before, I don't think Lightning nodes scale nearly as well as just like generate a pub key or private key for Nostr. So logging with Nostr is going to be big.
Yep. Cool. And then on badges.page, did you want to talk about the the transferability around badges?
Well, so one thing I'll notice, I don't know how I did this, but somehow I was able to log in and view with my pub key, your pub key, just like see various badges that people have been assigned. And it's interesting. Like there's like some of them were really fun. You gave me one for being on the, Nostr Talks podcast. And, I also got one for being one of the earliest members on Eden, which you probably got that too. And so I think you see a variety of different use cases. I think one concept that's very interesting is how do badges compare to quote unquote NFTs? One nice thing about a badge is that it's not necessarily making a claim that it's exclusive or that it's like the only one in existence.
Right.
And so although that could work, I think, a lot of the use cases you hear for NFTs, like people make up all of this bullshit, right? They're like, well, it can be used as like a special token gated to a community, or it can be used to show like you can enter a private chat group. Like it could be used as a ticket for a concert. All these things I've heard people say for years. Yeah. And those are like the only things they can kind of come up with. Well, okay, fine. Those are all well and good. But if that's the case, then you don't necessarily need it to be on a blockchain. You just need to have a trusted issuer, or, set of issuers that basically says, yep, this is issued to you, and then store it somewhere that everyone can, validate you actually got the badge or not. And so I think that the case of showing someone was an early adopter of something or a guest on a podcast, that makes a ton of sense. I think the case of showing that you have access to a special community or like it's used as a key to get into a gated relay or a gated private chat or real world events, all fine.
Yeah.
But all those things can also be issued by a centralized party, no problem. And then
which they are, right? These are a central, like if I make a thing for Nostr Talks podcast
Yeah.
and I assign you as one and you get accepted, that's fine. It's just like,
I trust
putting
you.
trust that I am the centralized party kind of who's making that decision. If you don't believe in me, that's fine, but
then don't believe in the badge, right?
Yeah,
Which is totally fine. And actually that reminds me, by the way, of like, and again, I'm sure there's a lot more of this rabbit hole that I haven't gone down yet, but the whole block DID VC thing, like verifiable credentials, like their whole thing when I remember reading about verifiable credentials originally was like, okay, like, not everything is going to be decentralized, and that's totally fine. There are institutions. We live in a society. We'll probably talk. Alan wrote a piece that kind of harps on this in a little bit, but like, if we say, cool, I trust that, Google is going to give out a badge to its first 1,000 users. Like, great, I'm putting my trust in Google, but that's valuable information for me because I think Google is a legitimate organization. And if you're one of the first 1,000 people at Google, probably you were a good, interesting engineer and blah, blah, or whatever. It's a verifiable credential, just a badge.
Yeah.
And so I think that's interesting. And again, I'm sure there's a lot more to the DID VC thing than that, but that was what jumped to mind immediately to me. So then it got me thinking about the NFT thing. It's like, well, what was the real value of NFTs? And if like we can do all of like the gating and all of the like special recognition, the only thing that was valuable there was speculation, trading.
Well, there's the transferability, right?
Exactly. And so
which may, like, I don't know how, I haven't really thought about the use cases, but like, are there use cases for, like, it doesn't make sense for, me to create a Nostr Talks, podcast guest, assign it to you, and then for you to sell it to somebody, like, or to transfer it even, right?
Well, and so this is where I was going to go with that. So the current state of badges are transferable. I think in the old, like, sort of Ethereum parlance, it's a soul-bound token or something, if you want to call it. Like, it's non-transferable. And it's literally a credential or something that's used to gate access something. All the NFTs that claim that their value came from, being a credential, essentially, their real value was because they were transferable. You could speculate on it and there could be a market value. And one could argue that a lot of the NFT market in the first place, like the art market in the real world, is just essentially tax evasion. That's its own topic. But even if it's not, it's speculation and gambling, and fine, it is what it is, but call it what it is. It's gambling. That's all it is. Now, then the question becomes, to your point, what do we need transferability for? Well, I think for all of the like recognition and credentialing and gating to specific communities, you don't really need transferability. If you need transferability, it's for, frankly, the speculation or collectors. Now, I'm not going to, and maybe there's other use cases, but that's like the main one that comes to mind for me. And I'm not going to make a judgment call on if that's good or bad. I'm not that interested in it. But as we've seen with the ordinals really taking off, some people are. And so I've heard a couple of people mention that you could have a separate class of badges, which are themselves ordinals inscribed on specific Satoshis. And that would be like an NFT transferable. So you could have both some rights associated with it and the ability to transfer it. With transferability comes speculation, which I think is bad for a lot of the like real world use cases. But if you wanted to do it, you could. And so maybe we'll see kind of both markets arise. Badges as, like actual, the real quote unquote utility tokens or whatever you want to call them, like something that actually conveys property rights with them. And then you'll see the speculative market around kind of badges and NFTs or badges on ordinals. That's my guess.
Right. Cool. Okay. So it sounds like we've got badges. Oh, the some of the negativity I've seen around badges, I wanted to get your thoughts on. So
I haven't seen any. What's that?
Well, some people say like, because it addresses sort of a broader question around how this new kind of protocol or publishing should work, which is if you start becoming you represent yourself as a member of all of these clubs and organizations that you are a member of, you start kind of revealing more about yourself. You're building like more of a social profile. It can be, crawled and harvested and used in nefarious ways. So it kind of made me, pause and think I think our mental models again are very like, we're sort of pattern matching to, maybe how we use Twitter, and we're starting to use Nostr in similar ways. But I wonder, is there a whole new type of profile, or are profiles the wrong way to think about it? Or are there like minimum profiles that we should create that get used only for like single use or kind of single context use cases, instead of having, in a sense, should we decentralize our own profiles?
Yes. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot to unpack there, but I think in general, quote unquote profiles is probably not the right way to think of it. There's going to be some general data repository that you have in the future. I think that you're going to be much more selective in how you reveal information. And so one thing that's happening in this first wave of badges is, at least on badges.pages, I can see every badge that's issued to you, whether or not you accepted it. in the future, I mean, like I probably like, who knows, like what random stuff's.
Is that right? You don't need to accept it?
Well, there's 2 different columns or 3 different columns. There's accepted and issued.
Oh,
And
but
so,
I thought that was only my view of it.
no, that's what I'm saying. Like I can't figure out how to do it, but I logged in with your pub key yesterday.
Oh, I see.
And saw every badge that you had been issued,
Oh, I see.
even
I
if
see.
you had not accepted them.
I see. Okay.
And so that to me seems kind of like, I probably don't want, like, who the hell knows? Like I have no control over that. So that's not something I'm super excited about. But I think what's going to happen is maybe you have in the future, maybe this actually goes back to like the DID and VC thing, like some like more like call it master key branch or master identity branch. And you have your own kind of like central data repository that you either have a trusted provider, or maybe you store in your umbrella or whatever. And then in every different interaction you have on the web, you may have a slightly different persona. And maybe, you have a site that's like a LinkedIn. And on that site, you only want to share your like where you went to school and where you've worked, and like it's kind of none of their business that you were at the concert or the club last night on Foursquare.
Right.
But maybe there's like a Foursquare site with your friends that like you want to show them. Like so I think there's just gonna be a lot more like you may have a central data repository and then a lot more selective sharing and different kinds of experiences.
Yeah, I wonder, because when we talk about publishing, the use of publishing is often to discover or search for information. I wonder if you actually were to flip the market and say like, you could represent yourself as, let's say you accept the badge I awarded you as a guest on
Once I
Nostr
figure out how to
Gambling.
do that.
And actually, I didn't create it with my actual NSEC NPub.
Okay.
So don't worry about it. We'll do it the right way.
Yeah.
But once I've awarded that to you, maybe in the traditional world we think about, oh, that becomes part of my profile and I like broadcast that I am that. But maybe what you want to do is actually not have it broadcast. And you want to selectively allow people who do a search, like if someday somebody searches and says, show me everybody who was on the Nostr Talks podcast, and instead of them getting the information, that query goes out to all the people, and people can selectively say, yes, because I've already investigated what the purpose of this search was, I'm happy to share that I'll represent that I do have that badge.
Or you might only let certain people that are searching, for example, you may not want to be everyone to know that you were an early investor in something for whatever reason. Like imagine this, you were an early investor in Bitcoin, right? You were one of the first Bitcoiners. Probably don't want the world to know that.
Right.
However, there are certain use cases where it might be very valuable. Like if someone else was as well, or, if, you're, as an example, you were early Bitcoiner, you're interested in investing because becoming an LP in Bitcoin venture capital funds, like maybe you want to let a select number of people know.
This is a no
that.
ads show.
Yeah, exactly. but whatever the case might be, the point being that like there are cases where you want to definitely restrict the set of people that can search you.
Right. Okay, yeah, it makes sense. I wonder how all these profiles get reworked.
Yeah, and I also think, like what are all these experiences going to look like? There's probably going to be like new link trees. I know they're like Vita kind of is trying to think about that a little bit. But what does your central social repository look like? Is that if you only view, like, what does that look like in a Nostr age?
And then when you layer in all the generative AI stuff that's going to happen, anybody I know who's working on or thinking about generative AI basically says the internet is going to divide into people who believe everything they see and then people who believe nothing they see on the internet. And in that world, like, what does it mean to have a badge or a profile? Like, I think if you're kind of in the, let's say the I believe nothing camp of the, how you consume, then you probably want to have almost like new protocols to be able to still, like, I want to do a search, but the search doesn't give me a results page. It issues a query that I'm maybe going to get a bunch of pings back a day later from the people who've decided to reveal that fact. And so it creates this it's like this inverse of search in a way, in that it's like you express your need and then the need expressor has their need revealed to people who might be able to solve the need. So we think about, I issue a search query, I get a results page. Probably in that farther future version where you have all this generative crap that kind of fills up the internet, you end up looking more at the, you issue your query and then you wait. And then a day later, you get pings from the people who match your query who've investigated you. And you've said, hey, I'm willing to share this about me to the people who want to investigate my query. And then they can sort of come back.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like that view. I do think that, and this was your conversation with that guy who was into AI a couple weeks ago. I do think that as generative AI makes the amount of information go infinite much faster, it's already infinite, but whatever, a much steeper rate, the ability to sign with your private key is going to be huge. The ability to do the value rank Satoshis and sort of like specific people that sent Satoshis associated with that's going to get more important. But I could see both. I could see a world where, you don't believe anything unless it's signed by like people that you've already whitelisted or people that have tipped that you've already whitelisted.
Yeah.
And then, so maybe you still will get part of that as like instant results, but then you always find new people that reach out to you selectively that you would then whitelist for future results.
Right.
It's going to be weird. Yeah.
I mean, that's why it's exciting to me.
Yeah.
It's everything changes. We can't, any of these assumptions that we're, rebuilding a Twitter-like thing or whatever, those are just like us playing, right? We don't really know what this thing looks like, but it changes enough fundamental assumptions that the whole thing gets kind of rebuilt in a new way. We don't just redo the things we have. We like build crazy new things. So
yeah,
that's why it's just fun to play and watch this unfold.
As one random aside, going back to one of our mutual favorite authors, Kevin Kelly. Here, one of the things he mentioned in What Technology Wants is, he has a whole chapter. He has actually a bunch of chapters, like for someone being so, and I actually feel kind of like this as well, so pro technology. He's also like got a pretty sober view of the downsides of technologies and new technology adoption. For example, he has a whole chapter in there on the Amish and how the Amish, it's not that they're anti-technology, but they typically wait several decades to adopt. Right. And then they kind of ask a question, does this new technology like cell phones or whatever, does it increase our desired goals as a community, which in their case may be to, propagate the community more and keep the community closer together? Or does it hurt that? And then they'll like let, early adopters try, the car or the phone, right. But typically it's already gone by a decade or some amount. And then they'll say, okay, this person's a guinea pig. Did it work? Did it not? And then make a decision for the community. He has another chapter in there, like on the Unabomber, which is its own fascinating read. And that guy, for those who don't know the whole history there, it's quite interesting, felt that like technology was about to swallow us and blah, blah, blah. But I think it's really interesting because it's something that I struggle a lot in my own life. I'm curious how you think about this, which is I love new technology. It's so exciting because I love being at the forefront. I love being part of the ideation phase and creative phase and seeing what can be built. On the other hand, I recognize that being an early adopter, for example, being an early adopter of Facebook is going to be like looking like, I think like smoking cigarettes, right? Like it's going to like, we're going to look back, our kids and be like, yo, how crazy is it that like, grandpa and grandma were just sitting there like becoming scroll monkeys. Like I think there's a chance like a whole generation is just going to be like, TikTokified, which, maybe that's good. Maybe it's not, maybe I become a boomer, but like, it seems like attention spans are going to get, completely screwed by that. But it doesn't mean in the future that we won't have much healthier versions of the internet and social media. I think Nostr based.
Yeah.
But yeah. How do you think about like being on the one hand, an early adopter and being at that exciting forefront, but also recognizing that there's a lot of danger in being an early adopter that, just not using the technology in an optimally healthy way for you or society?
Yeah, I mean, they're great questions and they go deep. I wouldn't claim that my kind of choices are the right choices. They're just like what I choose and my habits. But I think my curiosity always gets the better of me, and I have to try new things. Like I just have to see how it works, what it is, ask the questions, learn about it, play with it. And I don't think I think a lot of like early non-adopters, like they see something and then they have a bunch of questions about it, but they haven't actually used it.
Yeah.
Never seem to have what I'd say the right kind of suspicion.
Yeah.
Like, so I think the way to develop the best taste and caution is to engage with the thing, not academically, not like, oh, Nostr, that's some decentralized blah, 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 whatever. But actually like create an account, set up your thing, play with it, see where it fails, see where it succeeds, see where the failures are existential. Maybe you come up with something where you're like, look, it'll never work because X. Like some people say, it'll never work because it'll never scale. Like relays will just never scale. Well, I don't find that credible. Like I would say the structure that we have today probably is not the same structure that we'll have a month from now or a year from now. But I don't think we've run into like some sort of energy, sort of, singularity that suggests that like relays can't scale. I think they probably can. Like I don't see any reason.
Whereas with something like Mastodon, maybe you do reach that point because you have like a centralized administrator for each community. But
and so I think it's kind of like I have to be an early adopter if I'm going to be able to form an opinion. I can't really form an opinion about a new technology like Nostr until I've really got my hands dirty with it. Now I wouldn't consider the same for maybe like space flight or something. But with these like information and communication tools, I think so much of it is about human to human interaction and how we are going to work with each other and how we're going to work with each other into the future. So I think I'm a little bit more of just, I'm going to adopt the stuff. I think that if it can be built, it will be built. And if somebody tries to take the like safe, cautious route, somebody else will take the riskier route and the thing will still get built. And so I'd like to see where the upsides are and where the downsides are. And I want to participate. Maybe I'll weigh in with my opinions. I'll think about it. I'll try to understand the edges of it. And I just sort of like don't consider myself an expert at anything. I'm just a student of everything. So I would try to learn about it as early as possible so I can at least feel like I have developed the best opinion I can about it. And then I try to share the opinion and try to get feedback on it. And that's kind of my approach, but I don't claim it to be the right one. It's just the right one for me.
You would definitely be one of the guys in the Amish tribes. It's the guinea pig.
Right. Send him in the self-driving car.
Exactly.
Well, there I am.
Exactly. Already done that.
Yeah. It was funny. The self-driving car video, my wife took a video from the back seat and it was raining was it Wednesday night? It was raining and there were like windshield wipers going. And Matt Belez came back and he said something, I forget, it was like, is that entirely necessary to have windshield wipers on a self-driving car?
Oh, that's a great point.
Like, oh yeah, like we could just be sitting in this pod and it's going to figure it out through its own sensor suite. It doesn't really need to have a visual sensor go through the window.
I guess they want you to have a nice view.
Yeah, I think it's like to try to make it as normal feeling as possible. Like it's so wild that like if you can renormalize it a little bit, that probably helps. So
as a random aside there, like also it's kind of weird we're at that stage in self-driving where like the form factor is still like a car. Yeah. Right. Like it seems to me like in the future, like if this stuff works, which I think it will, it's like probably you have like there's more efficient designs for vehicles, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's like more like a bus or whatever. But it's just kind of weird that we're still at that like, oh, like this is like, you know, like the horses pulling the buggy or pulling the car kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, it's have you been to the Computer History Museum?
I never have. I'd love to.
Oh yeah. So in Mountain View, there's a thing called the Computer History Museum that all kinds of, you can, see like the old, I remember the first computer we had was an Atari 800. Wow. I think we got it in 1980 or something.
Damn.
And they have that same one. I look at it with all the little orange buttons. I feel like I'm a kid again.
Cool.
At the Computer History Museum, they have kind of, I'd call it's probably a prototype of what the Waymo kind of vision is. And it's more like a pod where you have like two people sitting on each of opposite sides, but you're facing each other.
Okay. That's
so
cool.
Instead of like the way most cars, everybody's facing in the forward position. In this one's like maybe two people are facing forward, but then two people are facing backward, but you're facing each other.
I like that.
And it just feels like a very different kind of pod experience. My guess is like for a bunch of reasons, like experiential and just like trying to normalize, like, keep everything familiar except the one really radical thing, which is there's nobody driving this thing.
Yeah, that one detail.
And then and so that's probably why like the windshield wipers actually make sense. And also just like there's big, I think Jaguar makes the car that, was part of the Waymo. They actually manufacture the metal and stuff. So they probably just have like assembly lines and, car production techniques that they haven't really redesigned that hardware piece of it yet.
Yeah, but it's going to be exciting.
Sounds like you want to start a self-driving car podcast.
I just think it's fascinating. I mean, look, I haven't gotten to do it yet. So maybe this week I'll try or whatever soon.
Yeah. Okay. I've got this. So we touched on porn.
Yeah.
But we didn't get deep on gambling yet.
Take it away, DK.
So, I'm kind of kidding, but also not. Like, I think there are, gambling and porn are early adopter industries on the internet because they're, high value. And, it's like a lot of people discover that, it's like a high value piece of media that people are willing to pay for. When I say high value, I mean that people are willing to pay for. And gambling is, it's something that people want to do. Like,
yeah.
So, and they have a lot of problems with fraud and payments, and all of those are sort of most acutely felt by those kinds of industries. So, it has been the history of the internet. And so I think it's not, I wouldn't say it's like, oh, it's a bad thing. I don't have any value judgment about it. I just think it's more like it's gravity. Like it's going to be the first stuff you're going to see. I literally don't have any opinion about it. I think it's fine. But we're seeing now this. So this is coin flip, which I think I just saw this week, and I think I saw a few different things that were related. Oh, and I've got a refresh here.
I love that. The quickest way to double your sats on Nostr.
Yeah. So verifiably fair coin flip game where you double your sats if you guess the result. And so I thought this was cool. I think I saw this on, was it Stacker News, or maybe I saw it on Nostr. And I think it was like somebody, the person who developed this, now I'll see if I can find the name, nostrcasino@getalby.com. So I think they had just come to Nostr and they were like, oh, cool, I'm going to just get my hands, dirty building something. And so they came up with this concept of you post at CoinFlip numsats to start a coin flip game, and you bet the numsats, and then a new game is started in your post thread. You pay the invoice for the numsats and then comment heads or tails. And if you guessed right, you'll be paid double the sats you paid, and you'll be asked for a wallet of Satoshi address the first time you win. After that, all payouts will be automatic to that address. So that's like a super simple concept. But I think, I don't know all of the techniques they use, but my understanding is when you start it, they sign a message that then reveals whether they had chosen heads or tails,
right,
is signed before you make your call, and they can prove that that's the case. They can hand it to you later so you can investigate. So, I mean, it's just atomic primitives, but with Nostr and with this messaging, it enables you to do this thing that we haven't really known how to do a provably fair coin toss on the internet unless you use a centralized server, which, then you have that trust issue. So
it's huge. I mean, and look, in the early days of Bitcoin, some of the biggest, use cases were Satoshi dice. I don't know if you remember that. That was literally a dice game, just like this. And then obviously all the poker sites, I'm sure that's going to get huge. A lot of early Bitcoiners were poker players, right? Because they just had to take their payouts in Bitcoin. So well, now you can run, poker games on Nostr.
Have you seen anybody building that? Or
I haven't, but honestly, I'm shocked we haven't yet. I mean, so many Bitcoiners are poker players.
Happen,
Of course it's going to happen. I mean, it'll probably happen next month, or this month even. So yeah, I mean, it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. So I just love this as an example of new primitives being worked. I mean, the use case I haven't tried yet. I'm curious about it, but I think the idea that we can remix just the very atomic primitives of what can be done, and then we can sort of build it into a little toy. And then you can start to imagine, poker is much more complicated than a coin flip, but you can squint and see where this is going.
Totally.
It's kind of.
And to your point, I mean, gambling always exists, no matter how much society tries to regulate it. It's there. So
yeah. Cool. Did you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, we've been going for a while, so maybe I'll just cover kind of briefly.
Yeah.
Moving, I know this is primarily a Nostr show, but there's so much overlap with Lightning. I think it's just important to touch on a few of the big Lightning pieces from the week. And on Stacker News, and he also, actually, there's a couple things I wanted to note meta about this. One meta thing I wanted to know is he shared this on Stacker News, but also shared on Nostr and shared the note ID directly on Stacker News. So I think it's interesting you're starting to see the cross posting.
Right.
Another meta thing that I just wanted to point out, and something interesting for Kian as he thinks about integrating Stacker News with Nostr, is the both audience size, but also some of the norms and just customs around tipping or pledging. So here, I think, how many sats did he get there? It's 1,600.
1,600, yeah.
So we got 1,600 here. I want to say on Nostr, I should have pulled this up beforehand, but it was I don't know, maybe 10x that or something, whatever.
Right.
And so one just quick meta comment I wanted to make is obviously Nostr has more users than Stacker News today. And I think as Stacker News integrates with Nostr, you're going to see, those two fuse, which is great.
Right.
But also, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I noticed on Stacker News, for whatever reason, just people typically started off, a year and a half ago when we really got started, tipping smaller amounts. It was 1 sat and then 10 sat. I changed my default tip to 21.
Yep.
And then occasionally I'll tip a lot more. Every once in a while, if there's a mind blowing post, I'll post 10,000 sats, but that's very special. But for whatever reason on Nostr, I've noticed people are tipping bigger. I've found myself tipping much bigger, partially because I'm not tipping from, in Stacker News, I have some money in my Alby, transfer that to Stacker News account. In this case, I've just been doing it from Cash App or a wallet. Right. And so I'll typically tip at least 1,000 sats, often 5,000, 10,000. I've even thrown a 100,000 sat tip.
Yep.
On Nostr, which I never would have done Stacker News yet. So that's just an interesting UX experience. I don't know if you've had that too.
Yeah. I think I kind of am the same. I have been doing, I think I got accustomed, just UX details. I got accustomed to the smaller tips. I forget what the default is. Maybe it was 10 sets on Stacker News originally, or I forget. Maybe it was 1. And then they had the exponential thing. So I played with it, but I do find myself because I don't have to top it up again.
Yeah.
and I happen to be using Wallet of Satoshi. I think there's a lot of good wallets, but I've been using Wallet of Satoshi with Damus, and that experience makes it easier to kind of just pop in. Like I'm sort of more thoughtful about the number because I'm looking at the number, whereas on Stacker News I'm not looking at the number, which I think is actually a feature from the UX in one sense.
Yeah,
I think I'd like that the bug of in the sense the bug of the UX. Let's say the UX bug of needing to look at it is not a feature.
Agreed.
But because it exists, and it exists for very reasonable reasons right now, because it exists, I end up upping it more often on the kind of like Damus, Nostr, Damus, Wallet of Satoshi use case than I did on Stacker News.
And I think some of that's also social norms. Like the fact that Jack was a major early power user on Nostr, and at least as far as we know, not on Stacker News, he's out there zapping 50,000, 100,000.
Right.
And so that just kind of just like ups the bar where you rarely see that. So just a random observation, something I think would be cool as Kian, observes those two communities collide, what that does to the tipping norms.
Yeah. Also the zaps on Stacker News are similar to like an anonymous zap concept from Nostr, right? Which like I can send you sats, but you don't know, the number that arrived, but you don't know who they came from.
And you don't see the comments.
And nobody else in the community can see who it came from, right? It's very different when you put that in public. So as Stacker News starts to think about Nostr integrations or becoming a Nostr client, like, do you redo that? Does it mess with the community? Is everybody going to be okay with that? Like, how should that work?
Well, and it's also very interesting because you think about, so it's like you have all these different things fusing, right? So in addition to Stacker News, you also have the value for value podcast and stuff like Fountain, and Albie's powering a bunch of those. And, they call them, I think Adam Curry maybe coined the term boostograms. And the idea in a boostogram is it's typically a larger payment, not always, but larger than, whatever a Stacker News click. And there's almost always a comment associated with it. And the idea, the real value for the podcaster is getting the comment, right?
Yeah.
And there's interesting analytics around that. And so, you've got Stacker News, whatever we call them there, like the lightning bolt. You've got boostograms, the podcasting 2.0. Now you've got zaps on Nostr. And I actually think you were discussing this with Boomy from Albie on Twitter a week or two ago. So, you've got all these different, they're all the same concept, which is I want to send some value to someone specifically around a note and potentially attach a comment to it. Maybe yes, maybe no.
Yeah.
And so, and Kamari actually put this beautifully yesterday, what we talked about in our podcast a week ago. He was like, that moment when you realize zaps are notes and notes are zaps.
Right. Yeah.
There we go, baby.
Yeah.
But the point is you have, these different communities. And so how do they merge? Does one win out over the other? Do different experiences live? My guess is that Nostr just has more users than everybody else. So I'm encouraging my companies like go with the Nostr flow just because it's exploding faster than Lightning or Value for Value did on its own, even though those are both growing solidly. But that'll be very interesting just to watch. Also, I don't know if you noticed this with on my last couple days zapping, I haven't actually been able to set the amount. It's just been an automatic 1,000 sat zap.
Oh,
on Damus. I don't know if that was a recent upgrade or.
Yeah, because I know there was a new Damus release, which we didn't talk about much, but I think it had a new page that was inserted where it would be like a little selector.
I didn't even see that this time. I saw that selector last week.
Oh, okay.
And then in the last day or two, I've stopped seeing the selector. So I don't know if I changed the setting, but it's just been zapping 1,000 sats.
Yeah, I heard some people complaining about that page as a little too much extra weight. I kind of liked it, but just as I'm like learning about it and thinking about it, trying to establish norms and habits.
I found it high friction, but what I did like about it is I love leaving the comments. That was very fun to me. Now it's like I have to go and like mess with the settings. Like, where'd my comments go? And again, it comes to this question, like it's easier when I can just do one click, but then I lose some of that richness of the comment. What's more important? So I don't know where all that's going to go, but that's all an interesting meta discussion. What I was going to cover on this post from Alan, which, is like in some ways less Nostr focused, but basically he just makes the claim that like, look, there's so much in the Bitcoin community in a lot of, at least, okay, let's say not a majority, but a loud minority of people that are all about non-custodial. And if you ever use a custodial Lightning service, that's like awful. And Alan just kind of pushes back here and says, look, non-custodial is great. Everyone gets it. But let's take a moment to just recognize how awesome it is that even with custodial Lightning services, you still get to plug into this interoperable, censorship-resistant monetary network. That's still like a huge improvement over the old fiat system.
Yep.
And, it's not perfect. And I think we all want, ideally, as decentralized as humanly possible. But this point is like, look, there's always going to be points of trust. And kind of like with Nostr, it's not like it's a perfectly decentralized system.
Yep.
servers, some will get shut down by certain governments, but they all won't.
Yeah.
Same thing with custodial lightning services. Like some guys are maybe running it in places that are going to shut it down in their country. Maybe others aren't.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I just thought it was like a very reasonable take on this. Like this is, for me, I see both sides. I invest in both types.
Yeah.
I love non-custodial.
Yeah.
I love the breezes of the world. I would love to see everyone truly get that experience.
Right.
But I also recognize it's just easier to use Wall of Satoshi right now. There's a reason people use Wall of Satoshi.
Yep.
It's centralized. And like, frankly, I wouldn't keep more than 10 or 20 bucks on there, but like if I get rugged on 10 or 20 bucks, so be it. And so I just thought that was like an interesting point from Alan, that until we get to a world where everyone uses non-custodial, and how we know when non-custodial is easy, because people will use it, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. Until that happens, I thought this was kind of an interesting pushback.
Yeah. And I agree. I think as long as the foundational pieces are there to allow people to graduate up to the fully decentralized non-custodial version of the world, I'm a little more, I'd say, middle of the road on does everybody need to do that? Like, I don't want to stop people from getting to try something.
Totally.
But I'd like them to try it and then graduate up to something more later.
Same. And again, this is why, I've invested in companies like Breeze. Like I want to make it so easy that it's truly the same user experience. But I don't think you can argue with the fact that like almost everyone has a wallet of Satoshi address just because it works. Now with those guys, like, I mean, I wouldn't want to be taking that legal risk, and I would just assume any money you have with them is going to get rugged at some point. I don't know them at all. They're probably wonderful people, but like, who knows if the government comes and takes their servers, like it's beyond their control.
Right.
But it also helped a lot of people get started to experiment with this stuff.
Yeah. It's like one less thing to try to learn about, and then you can kind of, sequence your learning and then eventually go full non-custodial. Yeah. And I don't know too much. I've seen Alan Farrington's name around before, but I don't know, is he generally, what's his general vibe or perception? Are people kind of...
Alan is a squirrel. That's funny. Like when I first,
that's his avatar. Or?
Yeah, he's got like a little cartoon squirrel, and jokes about being a squirrel on the internet. Alan's like remarkably smart. He's someone that I found actually a couple of years ago. I read some of his pieces on both. I actually don't even think it was Bitcoin, but like decentralized internet. He was writing about stuff like Urbit, which I found interesting back in the day, and just found him to be like remarkably, eloquent guy, very deep thinker. He wrote a book called Bitcoin is Venice. Anyways, I think he's one of like the smarter essayists. Back in the day, actually, he and Nick Carter went to school together, and they like in college were always like writing essays back and forth and stuff. So I kind of think about him in that sort of vein. I'm generally a big fan of his work. I think
is he generally kind of this sort of what I call like a moderate centralist view, or kind of pragmatic, let's say?
I guess. I mean, the funny thing is, I actually always thought of Alan as being a little bit more like, at least compared to the mainstream, he's like a pretty hardcore decentralization, freedom, free markets guy. In this specific case, I guess, amongst the Bitcoiners, maybe he's more moderate.
Got it.
But I mean, I found this dude writing about Urbit back in the day, which to me was like pretty extreme. So,
right. And is he on Nostr?
He absolutely is. Yeah. Okay, cool. I mean, Alan, if you're listening to this, I don't know if you are, but hit us up. Yeah.
Cool. All right. And then I'm looking at our list, and I think we didn't do Nostore yet. Do you want to? Because we did talk a little bit about, and we talked about Alby somewhat extensively, but I think we also wanted to talk about Nostore. So let me just pop up this.
All right. And then actually I also want to touch on one last op-ed as well.
We have a lot of stuff we didn't cover yet.
Well, we can skip some of this.
Yeah,
but
2 hours is going by fast.
I know.
We were going to keep it shorter today, but
not.
Where was it? Okay, so Nostore.
Yeah, Nostore. We were talking about Alby as a way to manage your keys on the web. Nostore, at least for now, is a way to manage your keys on your phone. Mm-hmm. And so you can create multiple different identities and have multiple keys stored on there, and then it's something that you can go and like use. Let's say if you have an iPhone, go to your Safari browser and authorize Nostore to log into various sites via Nostore. Anyways, I tried it out. I think it's a great idea. I mean, more ways to easily and safely manage your keys, the better. So I'm a fan.
Yeah. Awesome. I am gonna give that a try. I haven't gotten into it yet, but I noticed it this week, so I'm excited to play with that.
One last thing I also just want to mention on the Lightning side is Jared, the founder of Mash, which is another browser extension for Lightning and stuff. He wrote a really nice op-ed or essay that I liked around sort of micropayments. He kind of pushed back. A lot of people, we've talked about micropayments a lot over the last couple of weeks. And a lot of people, often cite this 1999 9 essay from Nick Szabo, who's kind of a god almost in the Bitcoin land, potentially Satoshi, and who was critical of it. He then wrote a follow-up piece in 2007 saying, well, maybe micropayments can work in some ways. Anyways, I thought it was a really good read from Jared. I think it's worth people checking out. His argument is basically like the infrastructure has gotten so much better for what he calls not only micropayments, which you might consider $1, but nano payments, which are 1 cent.
Yep.
He touches on Nostr, and I actually would go even harder on Nostr than he did in there. I think that's what's going to be what takes nano payments mainstream.
Yep.
But in general, I think it's great to see people, questioning maybe something that was true in 99, but in 2023, the technology has changed, and thus the possibility has as well. So I thought it was a good read.
Yeah, agreed. I'll link that in the notes.
Cool.
And actually, in my enthusiasm for it, by the way, is I think we have the technology that now lets us do a great UX for micropayments.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So it's like everything that can be done now is packaged in a way that it's easy to do, easy-ish, compared to maybe 20 years ago.
The technology that, allows for a better UX and also use cases, stuff like paying for the relays, that wasn't even on people's radar 23 years ago.
Yeah, we didn't have relays 23 years ago. All right. Well, this is a good stopping point. I still have yet to book my flights.
Same.
And figure out the bus or overland transit situation, whatever is going on there. So let's collaborate on that. We don't have to do it on the air, but we will do that. And hopefully next week we'll be actually Nostrika ready.
Let's go, baby. Excited to see all y'all there. It's going to be a fun time. Again, if you want to jam with us, hit us up.
Hit us up. All right. See you out.
Peace.